I used to live in Utica, New York. About 20 years ago, I was working as an AmeriCorps volunteer in the VISTA program at a hospice for those who were terminally ill. And I got to meet a sister of St. Joseph there who had had a remarkable life, Sister Pat. She was in her probably around 50th year of ministry at that time. And I had asked her a little bit about how her life had started off in the convent. She said, well, when I took my final vows in that beautiful chapel at the provincial house in Latham, she said, I quietly said to God, okay, this is it. I give you my life. I want you to use me wherever I can be of most service. Send me wherever you most need me to go. So when she opened up the envelope with her very first assignment, it was to go for further studies, to be a college professor. And she did that and had an early time in her ministry as a college professor and a mid-level administrator at a college. And then a few years later, the sisters asked her, we need someone at one of our Catholic high schools. Would you be willing to leave the college and go to high school? And so she had said earlier, God, use me wherever you want me to be. So she went to that high school. A few years later, they contacted her again and said, we need you to teach fourth grade. And so then she went and taught fourth grade. And when I met her, she was a cook and a lunch lady at an after-school program at an inner-city Catholic school in Utica. And I said, Sister Pat, what an incredible lifetime of ministry you've had. You've done so many different things. And she said, yep, my entire life I've been climbing down the ladder of success. But you know, in another way, that's not the truth at all. She was very successful. She set a goal. I want to be useful. Send me where you want me to go. Wherever the need is, I want to be able to go. And there was no one more successful than Sister Pat at that. Wherever it was that they needed her, she had no resistance at all. She didn't have to figure out how to change gears. That was something that she had decided long ago. And I think that she's a great role model for us as we listen to these scriptures, because the gospel talks about one way of focusing on what most matters. And that first reading with King Solomon focuses on another way. In the gospel, we hear about putting all of your focus into what Jesus calls the pearl of great price, the one thing you'd be willing to trade everything else for. Now, that kind of focus is probably a good way for us to think about it as like the kind of focus you need when you're deciding what to tattoo on your arm. You've only got one arm, and it's going to be there forever. So what is it that you want to say to the world? But King Solomon had a very different situation. He was given an opportunity for one wish, almost like a genie in a bottle. God said, you are the king of Israel. I will give you one thing that you ask for. Whatever it is, I will grant it. And that, to me, is a lot like figuring out what is the one thing we want to bring with us on a long trip if we're just bringing a tiny suitcase. I don't know if you've ever had that situation, but if anybody who's ever had to travel and go somewhere for a while, it can be very challenging to figure out, what am I going to bring if I can only bring one sweater? Which one is it going to be? What's the most versatile, best thing I could bring? So on the one hand, life can focus us by asking us to commit to one message, one way of doing things, like Sister Pat did. She tattooed on her heart instead of her arm, use me wherever you want. But the other way is when we have to whittle things down, subtract everything that doesn't matter, and just go to the one thing we can preserve. And that, to me, is what coronavirus has felt like. Hasn't it felt a little bit like we're fish in a pond that keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller? And all of us are trying to figure out, as the limits keep getting more and more stringent, as the months wear on, what are the things that we most need to preserve so that we can have the kind of life we want to have, even in this condition? And I would propose to you that that all comes down to the daily choices we make. I think no matter what your job is, or if you're retired, no matter what your family situation is, all of us are trying to figure out, when so much has been taken away, what is the one thing we want to preserve? I think everyone in schools has been facing that. Graduation this year was not like any graduation in the history of our lifetimes. They basically were given this kind of parameter. Okay, we're going to have graduation, but it can't take place inside, and the whole class can't be there at once, and nobody can hug or touch or congratulate each other. Okay, go. We're facing that for confirmation as well. Between our two parishes, we have 35 candidates for confirmation. Now, 35 candidates normally would attract a crowd of about 400 people for that ceremony. But the largest space we have is St. Mary's, and it can only have about 100 people right now at its maximum legal capacity. So as we're packing for confirmation, we're thinking, all right, we've only got this very small bag. Now we have to put the candidates in there. They've got to go. And we probably should save some room for the bishop somewhere. And the sponsors have to go. Well, now that's almost everybody. How are we going to do this? And that, I think, is what all of us have been facing. These choices, so that we can figure out what is the one thing that must happen if everything else has to go. I think that's a good question for all of us right now. As we think about all these ways we've had to focus and narrow and narrow and narrow down in our lives. What is the thing that you are willing to preserve, even if it's going to cost you so many other things? Or as Jesus might say, maybe everything else. His image is such a strong one. The merchant, the jeweler who has a jewelry store, is willing for this one pearl, not to just spend a lot, not to invest a lot, to give away the whole inventory of the store. So the store, which used to have all these cases filled with jewels, no longer will. They're all gone, so that the one pearl is there. The treasure buried in the land. The person looking for this treasure sells everything they have and goes out and buys the land. What would you be willing to give up everything else in order to preserve? What is your one pearl of great price? That first reading is really helpful because Solomon is given the chance to just have one wish. Whatever you ask, I'll grant it, but only one. And he asks for something that pleases God. And what's lovely for us is we get to hear God name a few things that would have been wrong answers. And here's what God says. When you are trying to pack for your journey and you only have room for one thing, don't make your health the thing you put in there. Isn't that interesting, especially now? Not good health, don't pray for that. How about money? Nope, not riches, not money. And then the third thing that's listed is revenge against your enemies. Don't ask for that. Which I suppose a lot of things would fall into that category, things that puff us up, give us a big ego. Don't ask for that. What Solomon asked for was something internal. He said, I don't know what else is going to happen, but give me an understanding heart. Give me the ability to tell right from wrong so that I don't wind up wasting a lot of time going down the wrong path. He was asking for internal things, integrity, empathy, joy. Let me put that in my suitcase for this journey. Everything else, I'll have to just let go of but that. And it's the choices we make in how we plan graduation, what we're going to do with the rest of our summer, how we're going to talk to our kids and grandkids about this. That's how we show and tell ourselves and others what is our pearl of greatest price. I have a friend who's been teaching now for 20 years, which makes her a veteran, and she's an excellent teacher. She is so good at her job that her administrators handpicked her to be one of the leaders for new teacher training. So she and the co-teacher who have been planning this have been saying, normally we would be gathering all the new teachers into a great big room. We'd have all sorts of icebreakers and ways for them to get to know each other. I don't think they play Twister, but you can picture, kind of the vibe of that. We share meals together so that by the time the first day of school comes, all of these teachers feel connected to everybody and have friendships forming. And they said, we can't do any of that. So they got together and they said, what is our one pearl of great price? And like Solomon, they decided it wasn't going to be any tangible thing. What they said is the thing they were unwilling to compromise on was connection. We want connection for these new teachers, and we just need to figure out what we can do so they can have it. So here's what choices around their pearl of great price looked like. They said, well, we don't want them wearing masks because seeing the face of someone you're meeting is so important. So they had to come up with a plan that didn't involve masks. But they also wanted it to be that these new teachers could get to know each other, could have some human interaction. And when you do that, you need a mask. So they realized that they could have connection if they invited the teachers to come to school and sit in their brand new classroom. I mean, you can imagine how fun it is for a brand new teacher to sit in the room that they're going to be teaching in. That's like a dream come true. And so they're sitting in that room, Zoom calling everybody else on the group. Now that means they don't have to wear a mask. But because they're in the school in their brand new room, and the other new teacher 3 doors down is in his or her new room, during the breaks, mask goes on, they know what each other look like, and they can interact with one another. They said, we're not willing to pack a suitcase for new teacher training that doesn't have connection in it. But as long as connection's in it, we can live with everything else. Those are the choices that we are making right now. We're trying to figure out, if I only have one arm, what am I getting tattooed on it? If I only can pack one thing for this journey, what is the one thing I am bringing? As I was writing this homily, I was at a place where there was a counter and people were ordering things, and I was noticing the tattoos that some people had. And one guy wearing flip-flops had tattoos on his ankles. I saw the left ankle and it said Hakuna, so I had a good guess of what the other one was going to say. And I saw a letter carrier coming by with the King and Queen of Hearts on fire. Oh well, that's your one calf. You can use it how you like. But you and I have this opportunity too, to choose whatever it is that we want tattooed on our hearts the way Sister Pat did. We have a choice to choose what is the one thing we're going to pack in the traveling bag on this journey. What is your pearl of greatest price? We reveal that to ourselves and others, one choice, one moment at a time.